Uh-huh. Okay, so if you have to drop or if you want to revisit this content, which I probably personally myself will be revisiting this content because today is all about digital accessibility, you will have the recording. What we did yesterday is when we went through our main, after we went through our main content, we stopped the recording just because some of these questions I totally understand that like you can feel maybe uncomfortable asking it in a recorded setting or you feel like you don't know enough. I'm here to validate that all of that is fine. If you feel like anything that we go through is something you don't understand, feel free to ask a question. Feel free to ask us to pause the recording, whatever it is. If you're like, I don't know what this term means, that is totally, totally fine. Everyone's coming in at different levels, and I want to make sure that we honor that and create a space where everyone can learn together. So, um, without further ado, I'm just going to reintroduce myself for everyone that wasn't here today. We'll do a very small icebreaker so that we can just get to know each other. Scott, that's totally fine if you're not in a space to talk or be on camera. Thank you for sharing that. If that applies to you, if you want to answer any of our icebreakers in the chat, that would be an awesome way to participate. Yeah, so my name is Nivi Achanta. I run a community called Soapbox Project. It is focused on climate justice, and as I said yesterday, climate change is related to like everything. Like we just can't go move about in the world without, I mean, if you're not thinking about it, that's fine, it still exists. And so part of the work that I do is I want to make sure that anyone that wants to participate in being part of the solution can. And so inclusion in the context of accessibility is a really, really big deal to me. I have a long, long way to go. I know some of the principles and concepts, but if I'm being honest, haven't necessarily taken the most action on, especially in the context of digital accessibility. So, Laneen, I'll wait for you to introduce yourself when you're ready to share content. I just want to give a little icebreaker question. You can all have a minute to think about it, but I would love for people to just introduce themselves, like who you are, what community context you're coming in from. But the question, and I'll put this in the chat, is name a time when you did something good, like, you know, for the environment or for other people, but it actually benefited your own life in many ways. And so if you're not sure what that question means, I'll start. I'll give you an example. So one thing that I always come back to is I joined my local Buy Nothing group in my neighborhood, which is all about like, it's like a local gifting economy. Think about Facebook Marketplace, but without prices and stuff. And so I joined that in an effort to be more sustainable and like get things secondhand. The positive ways that benefited my life is my entire apartment, which let me unblur my background. It's kind of messy right now. But like everything you see in the back, my awesome apartment, I set it all up for like less than $300 because I basically bought most of the things for $0. And I even got a nice cappuccino machine off of that group. So that was one time when I did something positive for the earth, maybe for other people, I don't know, and then got something good out of it. Yeah, whoever wants to go next can go next. I'll give everyone a second to think about it.
Can I go next and just piggyback off you because I have a
Yes,
buy nothing?
absolutely.
Like, so hi, I'm Steph and I'm with Burb. And so in my community context, I help many communities with their community communication and automations behind the scenes. Yeah, and I've worked with lots of different communities kind of in a freelancing capacity. But as I wanted to piggyback on the Buy Nothing group because so this is my second day back from maternity leave. And this child's entire life is built from the Buy Nothing group. And it's been such a blessing. Like I want to cry, like changing tables, strollers, clothes for the whole year, like things that I need and I just wouldn't have been able to afford. Like it's incredible how much a baby needs, and I had no idea. And the beautiful thing about it is as soon as I'm done, newborn clothes goes back out into the local, economy and to other people in need. So it's like a constant fast-paced rotation of goods for children in the community because they grow out of stuff so fast. And so like I'm near tears because the local Buy Nothing group is such a beautiful thing to see come out of social media, that it's really give and receive, give, receive. I love it. So thanks for reminding me of that, Nivi.
Thank you for sharing that. I am so hyped about your buy nothing baby. Jillian said I turned our backyard into a clover yard instead of grass. Amazing. Don't have to water it, and it's always super green. Jillian, did you want to say what community context you're coming into this from, either in the chat or if you want to unmute? Up to you, but I'll give you a couple seconds.
Thanks. I'll unmute just because it's faster. Sorry, I forgot about that part. I'm from SPI Media. I'm the director of community experience, and I also host a little podcast called the Community Experience Podcast. And I'm always looking for guests. Anybody hit me up? Jillian at Team SPI.
I'm sure that you'll find some guests on here. You want to drop the link in the chat?
I would be happy to.
Awesome. Kriselle, I think you also said something in the chat. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Kriselle, and I am the founder and host of a social enterprise called Empowered in Color, and I will also be speaking tomorrow. And yeah,
Amazing.
I love buying nothing, and spending nothing.
Hell yeah. We love it. I love that this has just been like a buy nothing appreciation fest. Steph, Sammy, Scott, Astrid, if that's how you say it, do you want to share either in the chat or quickly unmute? Well, Scott, you mentioned you didn't want to share live. That's totally fine. Astrid, I saw you just came off of mute.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Astrid. I am the Senior Manager of Community DEI at Alma, which is a mental health company based in Brooklyn. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. Did you want to share a time that you did something positive and it helped your own life? If you can't think of anything, that's totally fine.
Ooh, yeah, I need more time with that one.
That's totally fine. It's kind of a big question. Steph, Sammy, do you want to share? Oh, awesome. Owner of, oh yeah, self-care coaching. I love it. For folks to practice sustainable practices that support their individual needs. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat. Sammy, I'll totally invite you to share in the chat if you want to. And Laneen, I will pass it on to you to introduce yourself and all the things. But before that, I just want to encourage everyone to get like 10% more comfortable. You might have seen I raised my standing desk so I could stand instead of sitting all day. So if there's anything that you need, like water or a coffee refill or a pen and paper, go ahead and do that. And the second reminder that I always like to give is if you could turn off your self view in Zoom that you can do in the top right corner, it says like hide self view. I will encourage and invite all of you to do that because it helps us all be active listeners and actually focus on the content. And in this case, there's a lot of content to retain and apply. So give everyone a chance to do those things. And Laneen, let us hand this off to you. I am so excited to learn all the things.
No pressure, all the pressure. Thanks, Nivi. And all this like chat about the buy nothing reminds me, I have a friend who like clothes we always swap because we're pretty much same height and size. So I'm like, it's fall time, I need some new jackets. Let me go ahead and hit them up. So perfect timing. Hi everyone, thanks for showing up today. My name is Laneen. I use she and they pronouns. I am a brown skinned person wearing a black and white shirt with Super Nintendo controllers all over it because yay for gaming. My virtual background is blue sky with palm trees. And today we're going to jump into a lot of digital accessibility stuff. You're going to hear the word accessibility 10 million times. I apologize. Get comfortable with it now. There is no other replacement word for it. I'm going to start sharing screen before we jump in. And is everyone good on seeing the obnoxiously bright lime green screen? Thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, great. I'm a creative strategist. I'm a hard of hearing designer, and I love snacks. So if you guys have snack recs, please share them. I've Nutella'd myself out. So I'm also the founder of Sublation Studio. It's basically a design studio that offers creative services that's focused specifically on accessibility and diversity through inclusive practices in education. Super excited to talk to everyone today about digital accessibility, specifically for online communities. So the two really do go close hand in hand. So I hope you take away something today. And yeah, feel free to take notes. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. I know I tend to like get tunnel vision when I'm presenting, so I can't always keep an eye on the chat, but Nivi's going to keep an eye there. And there's actually going to be an interactive bit at the end of me word vomiting all over the place. We're going to have a fun little quiz, and we'll also have open floor for Q&A. Feel free to jot anything down that you might want to ask later. No question is dumb. Don't be afraid at all. Like, we're all here to learn together. I'm still learning, so it's all okay. I'm going to go ahead and jump in. The main question is, what is accessibility? And simply, it's just being inclusive to others. You know, as community leaders, that might specifically be for members that you guys have, but it can be for users with disabilities. It can be from people from different cultures and countries. And ultimately, as you know, community leaders or participants, it's just about understanding those people that you're trying to reach out so you can make a better and more accessible experience for them. Now, when people say accessibility, they tend to think of the physical first, you know, wheelchair ramps, canes, things like that. But there's actually other types of accessibility as well. So there's the conceptual. Think about if something's hard for someone to understand. There's economic accessibility, such as if something is affordable, a product or service. There's cultural accessibility. So think about in your content, if you're making references that might require someone to have a specific lived experience. And there's also social accessibility, tongue-tied, where you might be mentioning some social norms that might need a little bit more explaining or context. So since today we're focusing purely on the digital side of things, we're going to be mostly touching on the physical and the conceptual. Now, there's actually formal accessibility standards. So there's this big company called the World Wide Web Consortium, and basically they develop international standards for like the entire internet, which is a big task. But having these accessibility standards really helps like establish the minimum level of access we should be aiming for. We should absolutely be going beyond that, but at least we have some baseline to judge from. So they basically develop and improve regulations for both international and domestic levels, and also legally. Because like, let's be real, there's a lot of companies that do not care about accessibility unless there's a legal requirement. So having a company like W3C be like, yo, these are the rules that you have to follow at the bare minimum is actually really helpful. But I hope that people go beyond just the legal requirements and really, you know, put it as a part of their life and their process and, you know, any platforms they might be on. I'm a strong believer that digital accessibility is a journey. I'm all about progress over perfection. There's no such thing as perfection. There's tons of plugins that you'll see for websites that are like, oh, make your site perfectly accessible. That's a lie. I'm telling you right now, those things are a lie, okay? I can go on a whole rant about accessibility plugins, but I won't. But really just think about it as a baby steps. You know, you're going to implement and iterate as you go. If you were able to attend Abbiola's presentation yesterday about inclusion with communities, she mentioned that, you know, inclusion isn't one and done and it's not a checklist. And the same thing applies for accessibility. It really is an ongoing practice. And it hopefully will become part of your process and your way of thinking. So I really just encourage everyone to make messy mistakes, you know, learn more and ultimately just improve. So it's a journey, and even I'm learning it a lot every day, especially as technology is constantly changing, language around accessibility is changing in terms of like identity terminology, et cetera. So it's a process. We're gonna knock out a couple of accessibility myths right out the gate, okay? Because I hear these a lot. The first one is that digital accessibility is hard or complicated. And honestly, it's no more hard or complicated than learning anything else new. Yes, there is a learning curve, and it might be a challenge, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. Another myth I always hear is that it's time consuming. And honestly, you just get efficient over time. It's like I said, if you make this become your practice, you'll get better and better over time, and you're really going to add value to your communities. Money is obviously a big issue, whether you're a community leader or you're maybe on an organization that's thinking about starting one. It's always the myth that, oh, accessibility is expensive. There are tons of free or low cost ways to make your content and your service accessible. I'll tell you that much right now. And honestly, it is going to be a lot more expensive if you get sued for being inaccessible. So I guarantee you, you do not want to do that. Or worse, like if it hurts your brand reputation or your organization's reputation because you're seen as like some inaccessible jerk. So I encourage people to not think about accessibility or the people that need it as an expense. I see it personally as like what I consider the cost of care, the cost of equity. And for me, it's not just seen as like a line item on an Excel sheet. Another huge myth is that ugly graphics and aesthetics. As a designer, I have a huge problem with this. And I will tell you that design does not have to be sacrificed for accessibility. It used to be before, it's like, okay, we're going to design the ideal thing, and then we have to keep stripping it back in order to make it more accessible. That's not true anymore, especially with a lot of the website builders or like platforms that allow people to edit their own graphics. Like you can really make stuff that's like visually striking or even animated, interactive, and still be accessible. And especially if you start to consider accessibility in the beginning of a project instead of tacking it on the end where you have to like reverse engineer and redesign. And the last myth I want to dispel is that accessibility practices are only for disabled people, and that is 110,000% not true. As Nivi showed us in the icebreaker, that things that you do for others or for yourself can actually be co-beneficial. There are actually tons of people that are not disabled that benefit from accessible practices. So if you think about like older people, for example, their abilities might be changing due to aging. Or if you think about someone that has considered like a temporary disability, for example, let's say you broke your arm and now, swiping on your phone or something's not as easy, or you lost your glasses and now you're squinting and that little gray text on white that looks so cute in a carousel on Instagram is now really hard for you to read. Or, when you think outside of maybe global North privilege, there are lots of people that have slower internet connections or they have limited bandwidth, and so you think about all these things, how it can really help people that aren't disabled. And it's really just you're expanding your audience and who has access to your content. So we got all the groundwork in. We're going to dive in and just start like the action stuff. And it's going to be a jam-packed 30 minutes. So by all means, Nivi's keep an eye on the chat. I can't even see it with my two fancy screens. So
you're all good. We're
Okay.
just putting some comments in the chat.
Awesome.
Kriselle said she didn't even know that graphic design until recently could be inaccessible. So we're already learning a lot and we're really excited, but no questions. Yeah, I'll just do another reminder. If anyone does have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I can find a good time to interrupt, or we'll take them at the end. We'll decide how to.
For sure, yeah.
do that.
Jump in anytime. And
Yeah.
Kriselle, there's a section about design actually that might be helpful for you. Okay, so as people that might be running or starting or thinking about starting a community, you're going to have to manage it both internally and externally, right? For content and communication. So you'll have internal events like live support sessions, or you might have some external marketing like promoting on social media. So the tips we're going to go over today can really be applied to all these different channels. And of course, we want people to enjoy the party once they're in your community, but getting them there is actually half the battle. Okay, so keep in mind that the perception of your community comes before people are even in it. So that's why accessibility, both internally and externally, really matters. So even if you take one step away from this today, one action item today, you're really going to start helping build trust and a positive outlook for what members can expect once they join your community. So the first place you can take action is social media, okay? So let's say you got the word out about your community, right? And social is like one of the main ways you're doing that. There is one super easy, super fast way to make your social media content accessible. And I will tell you, it's simply by capitalizing your hashtags. So simple. So there's a type of assistive technology called screen readers, and basically just reads aloud what's on a screen of a device. And it helps people who have difficulty seeing actually accessing and interacting with digital content. And so these screen readers will just kind of read in chunks, and wherever there's chunks of letters together. When you capitalize your hashtags, it actually knows where words start and end. So instead of just reading one long blurb, we're going to go ahead and put some on mute. Awesome. Instead of just reading one whole long phrase as nonsense, it'll actually know what words, where to read which words and where. And it's actually helpful as well for people who don't have any visual disabilities, because it's just honestly easier, like even for me, to see those capital letters and be like, okay, I can see accessibility for all, instead of like, what is that? And we all know sometimes we've seen like those memes where like someone has a website and once you type it all in, 2 words blend together and might make another inappropriate word. You kind of risk that sometimes without the capitalizing. So that is literally, it'll take you 5 seconds to do. Try it next time you're posting on social media about your community and you're just throwing in some hashtags, just toss in those capital letters. Video. Okay, so you have, let's say you have some teasers for your community, right? Or maybe you have a freebie training that you're like, I want to share this with people. I want to get more people in my community. And to make your video content more accessible, please include captions. I am a hard of hearing person. I'm an American Sign Language user, so I will harp on forever about captions, 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 please. And the words captions and subtitles are actually used interchangeably in the mainstream, but there's actually a difference between what they do. Okay, so captions are those little on-screen words that you see. It transcribes dialogue. So if someone is speaking, those are the words you'll see. But what people don't know is that it also describes audio. So if there's sounds in the background or animals are making noise, it'll actually include that. Captions are really meant for people that cannot hear audio. Subtitles, on the other hand, are really for translating dialogue, just the dialogue, so that it has nothing to do with the background noise. And they're really designed for people that can hear, but don't understand the language. So my main language is English, but if I'm watching, let's say, a Korean drama, I'm gonna benefit from having the English subtitles on. So that's the difference. Captions are all about dialogue and background sound, and subtitles are about translating. So just to have a little visual example here, there's some screenshots from Moana, which I love the animation. You'll see on the left side, the captions have both the words that Moana is saying, which is "we're okay, Pua," Pua is the pig, and it also describes the sound the pig is making. In brackets, it says Pua grunts. On the right-hand side is that same screenshot, but you'll notice the subtitles only translate what Moana said. In this case, this is the Spanish subtitles, so it's translating "we're okay, Pua" to "estamos bien, Pua." Captions, are super important because a lot of these communities have video content. So if you guys have recorded course modules, if you have replay of your live sessions, it's really important that you include captions. There's a ton of technical jargon around captions, but basically you just need to know that there's tools that will automate them for you. It's a great starting place. YouTube's the most well-known, but there's also some ones that you can use in a browser like Headliner, Kapween, and Veed. I personally use one that's called Descript because it also allows me to video edit. It allows me to cut out clips and resize for social media. So it's a bit more robust, but the captioning is on there. Super handy tool. So 52% of students found that captions are helpful as a learning aid because it improves their comprehension. So if you're running a community that's really educational based, those captions are really going to help not only reach a wider audience, but help the people with learning and learning and comprehending more of your content within the community itself. So this is really helpful, especially when you're embedding those videos in your community platform and you want to improve engagement between your members and the content. So captions, captions, captions. And another stat is that 85% of video on Facebook is actually watched without sound. So while you might have your captions inside your community, when you're putting videos out on social media, also include captions there, okay? Especially since, TikTok and Instagram are becoming so heavily focused on video, captions are probably more important than ever. But captioning on social media now is also super easy because yay, technology. So Facebook has auto captions, which will generate them using artificial intelligence. I will tell you, please review your captions. I have seen some wild things pop up that are very inaccurate because auto-generated captions thought the speaker said something and it's inappropriate. So please, if you're going to use any kind of AI generated thing, just give them a glance over. Instagram's actually made it super easier now because they have in Instagram stories, what's called a sticker, where you can pull captions that way. There's third-party apps. The most popular is called Clip-O-Matic on iPhones or AutoCap on Android. Or you can even go, super easy way where you just open up the text box in Instagram stories, type out something and just toss it up there. If you're posting from a smartphone, a lot of the keyboards have talk to text. So just speak into your phone, let it type out words, and then go ahead and post as well. So there's literally zero barrier entry for putting captions on your social media video content. So I'm going to go ahead and pause. Nivi, is there any questions from this section? I'll go ahead and take them before we jump into talking about virtual events.
Yeah, I had a question actually. I don't know if anybody else
Yeah.
had the same question, but you kind of mentioned this with the like glancing over auto-generated captions. How do you feel about like live, like for example, the Zoom live transcript? Because, you know, I'm sure you've noticed
yeah,
it's not the most accurate, and I don't know if there's a better, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
there is a better way, which is perfect because this virtual event section is actually going to tell us an alternative to the AI generated ones. So perfect timing.
Does anybody else, I'll just hold a couple seconds. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm just going to remove Laneen's spotlight for a second.
Yeah,
Either unmute or, hi Abbiola. Either unmute or put in the chat if you have any questions.
and if anything pops up as we're going, go ahead, Nivi.
One was just, are you going to be sharing, or okay, sharing this deck? I also will have a worksheet that I'm attaching.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm all for it. I know it's hard to retain all that information in 30 minutes and there's lots of mentioning of different products. So I'm happy to share the deck afterwards and you guys can check them out.
Great. Sorry, Joanna. Oh yeah, okay. If you have old videos in a vault, like for your community, you mentioned pre-recorded events and stuff, can you go back and add captions with the tech that you mentioned? So for example, many of us probably haven't maybe thought about this subject and we want to go fix it. Would we be able to use the tools that you recommended to do that?
Yes, for sure. So if you're taking an old video that never had any captions, you'll be good to go. If you're using a video that was already captioned and it's considered what's burned in, meaning the videos are stuck on the video, you will have problems. So if you can use the original video file raw without any captions, you'll be good to go.
Awesome. Any other questions for this section? Or you can just think about more questions and ask them later.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's keep going and then I will field any upcoming questions.
Awesome. So virtual events, one of the key pillars of online community is you guys, having virtual events, such as live Q&A sessions or maybe workshops like what we're doing now. So it's really important to have those accessible as well. So, one of the best ways to make those live events accessible is using live transcripts. So we all know Zoom has it, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, and there might be some other names that I'm not familiar with that have the feature built in. So as long as, the host enables it in the proper settings, you should be good to go. I do want to offer an alternative. Like Nivi mentioned, those auto-generated ones sometimes aren't so accurate, but there is a service called CART. It's called Communication Access Real-Time Translation. So CART is when there's actually a human that's trained to caption and they're listening to the speech and they're instantaneously transcribing all speech to text. It can be done remotely and it can be done in person. It is a more expensive service, so usually larger organizations will opt for CART, but the pricing is becoming more accessible, especially since the pandemic and there's more need for online events with a need for live transcriptions. So there are a bunch of services out there. If you look for CART transcriptions, you're likely to find a couple. But yeah, the human will probably get you way more accurate. Also, the good thing about having CART with the human captioning is that sometimes you can speak with the person or speak with the team that's going to be hiring the CART person for you and let them know, hey, here's some industry specific terminology you might be hearing, or here is some, words that might be in another language that we're going to be using, especially if you have a lot of cultural references. They can kind of get that cheat sheet ahead of time. So there's not like, maybe a gap or misspelling or things like that. And you can be like, hey, we're talking about community X and here's an indigenous practice. Here's how you spell it. So you can really prep them ahead of time. And that goes miles in terms of accessibility and just being thoughtful. So that's a bonus for CART. A little pricey, but can be worth it. So if you're on a big company, tell them. A couple of bonus tips for virtual events. is one way I like to do is start off with visual descriptions. So speakers, and the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned, what I was wearing, what my virtual background is. Again, that can help anyone with any visual or cognitive disabilities. Offering the transcript after an event. So for example, Zoom, you can save the chat, or you can, if you have any integrated AI caption system, offer that if possible. If allowed, depending on the content that's being shared, offer the deck or the presentation that you had during the call. Like here, I'll be offering this PDF for you guys. And then another little tip that's helped me is a lot of times after events, you want feedback on how it went, and maybe you'll email all your people after the event and be like, hey, what did you guys think? Please fill out this form. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll set aside 5 minutes during like soft closing time and put the link in the chat then. I find that helps reduce cognitive load, maybe for people that have ADD or ADHD, or maybe people that have memory difficulties, to ask them later after the event, hey, hop into this or keep an email out, can be a lot. So if you're doing like a soft close for your event where you're winding down with music or just saying bye, maybe drop the link for any feedback then. So while you have people in the space and they're focused, you can take advantage of any feedback. I'm going to go ahead and pause before we go into our second to last section. Nivi, any questions, concerns, and chat, and any attendees, if anything popped up, any like uh-oh moments that you can think of where you might have messed up and you want to be brave and share, by all means, floor is open.
And just to reiterate, in the beginning when you mentioned like progress over perfection, like Zoom transcripts, as bad as they may be, are better than none,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely, yes, they are, because they actually have improved, and as AI is getting better, we've seen with all these like weird tools that are like mashing up artworks and stuff, a lot of the platforms are getting more accurate. They still have challenges with any language, any non-dominant languages, so like English, French, Spanish, languages outside of that, and they can also have problems with quote unquote accents. So, but I fully encourage, if you have nothing else, please use the automated captioning instead of opting for nothing at all.
And Steph says the feedback thing is a great idea. Once a call is over, my ADHD says that call is over forever. It equals
Done.
task completed. Absolutely.
The call is officially dust in my memory. The moment I hit that end call button, it's done. So don't ask me for anything else after.
Does anybody else have any questions, thoughts, anything that you want to share? We'll just hold like 10 seconds in case anyone wants to say anything.
All right, cool. We'll go ahead and dive into the next two sections. So this way we can leave enough time for any extra Q&A and also for the little activity. So we're going to shift from moving images and video to static images. So while promoting your community, you're probably going to have a ton of images, whether it's Instagram or Twitter. And there's a huge thing that you should probably know, which you maybe already heard about, is considered alt text. The full name is alternative text. So it's basically just a brief description of an image, so someone can understand what that image is about without being able to see it. It used to be kind of like a guideline to keep your alt text to 125 characters or less, or maybe like the length of a tweet, 140. But those guidelines are really changing right now, because we're really shifting more towards accuracy instead of some like arbitrary line length, or character length, I should say. So having alt text for your images helps, again, like we mentioned, screen readers before, or people that have internet that's kind of slow to load, or even if someone has images turned off completely on their device. So it's super easy as well to add alt text, and we'll show a couple of ways to do that. Facebook actually lets you do it straight in their platform, whether you're on the app, whether you're online, or if you're using, I think they call it Facebook Business now, but it was also previously called Creator Studio. I know there's two sections floating around, but pretty much almost anywhere on Facebook that you can interact with it allows you to add the alt text. Instagram lets you do it in the app. Unfortunately, it's buried and it's marked in light gray on white background, which it drives me up the wall. How are you going to have the accessibility title be inaccessible? That's neither here nor there. If you scroll down, it is buried and you can find it. And they also let you do it now officially when you're posting from the web browser. It's right under the caption section, and you can type in your alt text there. Instagram, like we're talking about the whole auto-generated thing, does automatically generate alt text. The problem is that you can't hear it unless you're running a screen reader. And so you won't know what they picked for your alt text. That's why I encourage you to manually write it. I've run alt text through screen readers before, the ones that were generated, and yeah, it was wild. So please just manually hop in and type, you know, green plants underwater or anything that it is. And we'll go through some tips about how to write that. You can also do it for Twitter. They have a quick little button, both in app and on the browser. So that's alternative text. And there's also something very similar to it called image description. And they're actually two different things. Again, people are kind of using them interchangeably on social media, but there's a difference. So image descriptions are really a longer form description, okay? They have a lot more details and a lot more context than just alternative text. Alternative text, think of it as like key information. If this image did not show up, what do people need to know? And for image descriptions, think of it as something that goes with the image. So the image is showing up, what additional stuff will be helpful? And this extra bit of information can help, you know, people that are colorblind or cognitive challenges, or even just sometimes people that just want more info. It's especially helpful for anyone who's running a community that involves like data visualizations or infographics. You probably can't put everything you need in the alt text, and you can put that additional information and context in the image description. So on Instagram, for example, you can write that either in your caption and you can abbreviate it ID before you write the image description, or maybe even just put it in your first comment if your caption is already too long. If you're posting inside a community platform like Circle or Thinkific or Teachable or something like that, you can upload your image and then right below it, just write ID and then type out the description there. Similar to like when you might see a photo online and it says like, you know, credit to photographer person X. So just make sure you have that image description somewhere near your photo when you're posting in these kind of community specific platforms. So writing alt text and image descriptions can be tricky, but I have a little bit of a tip. When I'm writing the image descriptions, I think of object, action, context. What is the thing or the person? What is happening? And where are they? So for the photo on screen, there's a dog sitting, and for the image description, I have puppy sitting outside by flowers. It gives all the information that someone would need. If you're running a community, like I mentioned, that has a lot of data visualization, or you have a lot of text heavy graphics. So I think of a lot of like social justice communities that have a lot of those activist action guides, like 5 steps to whatever, and they're like loaded with text. You might need to have a longer image description, and that's okay. It's really about accuracy of information than being, you know, super short. For example, if you had, let's say you're a puppy community and you have this one really adorable puppy, but the puppy's in 10 different situations, you can write a longer caption that would say, black and tan colored German Shepherd puppy, sitting outside on concrete in front of purple flowers and brick wall behind. And then other image descriptions might change where the puppy's sitting. So we're gonna pause before our last little section of design. Is there any questions about alt text image descriptions? I know that, you know, people are trying to get better in terms of writing them on social media, but it can be sticky writing them, I think, and considering what's important and what's not important. So if anything pops up, feel free to let me know.
Yeah, I think just like the big guidance, and maybe we'll do this at the end, or you're already planning on doing this, is just like, I think that example with the dog really helped. I feel like when I write alt text, I don't really know how to do. I liked the breakdown of object, action, and context, because I've just been like writing random stuff and hoping for the best. And I think it would be good to get more context of like what makes sense to put in these alt text / image descriptions as we're writing them. And the platforms have been a lot more helpful. Like I've definitely noticed that with Twitter's rollout of having image description like buttons, I at least put something. I don't really know how much helpful context I'm giving, but just more guidance on that. And if anyone else has anything to add, please put in the chat or
Yeah, the big platforms are definitely, I noticed that with the Twitter button, that big plus alt button being there has really increased people just being like, well, I'm posting, I might as well toss it in. So I know that Kriselle had a mention about some design stuff earlier. We're going to touch on that. So, okay, maybe your community has a name, right? And you're like, I want to promote it and I'm ready to like put my branded graphics out there. One of the easiest ways for accessibility of your community graphics has to do with color, okay? So checking the color contrast of your images is very, very helpful. So color blindness is also called color vision deficiency, and it's a challenge in distinguishing between different colors, right? So there's different types of color blindness, whether it's green, red, etc. And so although color blindness is primarily inherited, it can actually result from a variety of things like aging, injury, or illness. So, you know, reiterating that digital accessibility helps people, disabled or not, and also people with a range of disabilities, regardless of how they came to be disabled. So there's a bunch of free tools and like browser plugins and extensions and stuff, but one of the quickest and easiest ways for someone new to this is a tool from Adobe, and it's at color.adobe.com. And what I love about it is that their colorblind safe tool lets you put in your brand colors, and they'll flag it if there's any contrast issues. They'll tell you specifically which two colors or more have any issues. And there's little dots on a color wheel that actually lets you move them around to interactively correct them. So if you're like, oh, okay, this blue and this other blue are clashing, let me just move this dot over a little. It's super helpful. And for people that are, if you're running a community organization, maybe your company or your broader organization is more stringent and they have to follow those legal rules that we mentioned earlier on, the Adobe tool actually will give you the exact numbers. So there's contrast ratio numbers that are very specific to the legal guidelines. So if your organization says you guys have to meet a certain number, the Adobe tool will actually tell you if you meet that number or not. And even better, they'll suggest colors that are automatically within the right range. So if you have like a tan and a brown and it's really crappy, they'll be like, hey, actually, if you make this orange brighter and this brown darker, you'll meet the minimum legal requirements. So great tool, very interactive, easy to learn right away, and it's free. So on this on the screen here is an actual graphic of a data visualization. And I really believe that accessible digital content can actually be beautiful. I don't think that you have to sacrifice aesthetics for accessibility. So in this infographic, you'll see there are paint swatches surrounded by spider web-like lines. And the way that this graphic is actually accessible is because of, one, there's color contrast. So they use complementary colors, for example, blue and orange, purple and yellow. Those colors pairings have great contrast. Two, there's actually labels of the percentages. So even if someone was colorblind, they can still understand where the numbers are. And then three, that those spider web-like lines really visually help create a scale. So like when you think of a bar chart and you see axes lines, that helps you. Even if you don't know the exact height of the bar chart, you can be like, okay, well, this is the axis line for about 50 and this bar is a little over that, I can gauge. So this is a great way that you can see an infographic that's beautifully done, but it's also accessible. And even if you have one that's more text-based, for example, you can make sure that your text is large, that there's lots of visual space around it, that numbers and labels are clear. And that's a great way where you can kind of have like function meet form. So something's beautiful and it works. So to recap all of our crammed in session, if you're looking for some digital accessibility for your online community, some quick ways to get started are by capitalizing your hashtags, captioning your videos, offering live transcripts, checking your graphics for color safe, and for your images, making sure you have alt text and image descriptions. And I know that that was a lot, but I find that quizzing people is a little bit of torture, but also a little bit of fun. So we just have 3 quick questions that we're going to go through. Feel free to drop your answers in the chat as we go along. Don't be shy. We're all here to learn together. So question 1, what is more important when implementing digital accessibility? A, involving people with disabilities. B, calculating a return on investment. C, regularly reviewing your practices. Or D, both A and C, which is involving people with disabilities and reviewing practices. I'm going to sing some Jeopardy music in my head. No, not Jeopardy. What's the, it is Jeopardy. Yeah. I'm going to sing that music in my head for a second. Give everybody a chance. Okay, the big reveal. If you said A and C, you are right. Obviously, getting a good return on investment can be important to the larger companies, but to me, it should be a bonus and it shouldn't be the sole motivator for digital accessibility. If your company or your organization that's helping you run the community is really set on crunching those numbers, let them know that 1, there are millions, if not billions of more people that they can reach. by having accessible content, and that 2, by evaluating and improving your practices, it actually creates a cumulative effect, which then creates more financial benefits and also intangible benefits like a positive brand reputation. So question 2, what could be an image description for this photo? So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of tips to help you think about this. And this question is tricky because I get a lot of times, how do I write an image description when it comes to ethnicity, ability, gender, etc. And so here are 3 guidelines to kind of help you think about, is race and gender and these things important when I'm writing an image description? Number 1, is it relevant to the image? 2, do you know what their identity is? Is it confirmed? Or 3, if the way you're describing this is consistent with other image descriptions, or is this just the one out of 300 other images that you're calling out race and gender and ability? So just think if it's relevant, if it's confirmed, and if it's consistent. Because sometimes, honestly, mentioning race and gender might not even be necessary at all. So I'm going to pause and give everyone a moment to kind of think, what kind of image description would you possibly write for this? And then I'm going to reveal the real one.
I've done an activity called Zoom Waterfall, which I think would be a great format for this because I want to encourage everyone to be courageous. And that's when you type your answer, but you don't send it until everyone's done, and then we all send it.
Nice, yeah.
And I know that this, like, personally, this is stressing me out. So I just want to validate that's an okay thing to feel, and this is the right space to be stressed out, because when it's time to apply these to your communities, then we'll know what to do. So good, Julian, I'm glad I'm not alone in this. So why don't we all take our best shot? We'll give a thumbs up either with your actual hand or your Zoom, this thing, and then we'll send it, and no one's gonna be mad if you're like off or describing something like wrong or differently, and we can talk about it together. So yes, let's be stressed out.
Yes.
Together, give me a thumbs up when you're done. Once everyone's thumb is up, we'll send them in the chat.
Remember, you're trying, so that's all that matters, that you're getting started, and you got to start somewhere. So why not here? Brave space, no worries. And Nivi, I'll look to your cue for the reveal of the answer, since I can't quite see thumbs up and stuff like that.
Sounds good. I'm still writing mine, so I'm
Okay,
doing
take your
another
time,
minute.
no worries.
All right, I'm giving my thumbs up. I can feel that this is like probably not going
It's
to
first
be.
draft, it's okay, no worries.
It is. All right, I saw a thumbs up from Steph, Jillian.
Yep.
Or sorry, Joanne, I don't remember if you gave a thumbs up. Other Steph, Kriselle, Scott. I'll wait till I see a couple more thumbs up and then we can send ours in our stressful solidarity. Thumbs up from
A little
Kriselle.
midweek stress for you guys. Yes.
I know. This is good though, because I think the reason that I avoid adding image descriptions in the real world is because I don't know how to do it. So,
Mhm.
all right, everybody hit send on your Zoom thing.
Send. Yeah. Okay. While those trickle in, I'm going to do the reveal of what it actually was. Feel free to compare to what you have. 3 Black and disabled folks, a non-binary person holding a cane, a woman sitting in a power wheelchair, and a woman sitting in a chair, partially smiling at the camera while a rainbow pride flag drapes on the wall behind them. So that was the actual image description. And you'll notice that they did go quite in depth about gender and ability. And that's because here context really matters. The photo came from a project called Disabled in Here, where they're a library of photos specifically for disabled Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So since that was a focus of their content, including race and gender was really important here and part of describing identity. And it's an example of describing identity when it's relevant, confirmed, and consistent. So hopefully everyone, sorry about that panic, go ahead and breathe. It's okay. I promise no political, yeah, you're not gonna go to political jail or anything here, don't worry.
I really, this like reading this description really helped, and it also made me realize like if we were, for example, taking this photo and working on this project, I feel like I would have a lot more confidence describing the identities of the people and like didn't really feel comfortable guessing. And so, yeah, I think that the notes that you had given about like the context really matters. And also what I learned from this image description, which was helpful, is in my own image description, it to me, it looked like the person in the back was holding the wheelchair. I didn't realize that it was a cane.
Ah,
so
gotcha.
in this case, I'm like seeing the benefits of getting that context.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of larger companies, I won't name any, where they've just kind of shied away entirely and are like, actually don't mention race ever. Like instead of saying this is a fair skinned person or a brown skinned person or anything like that, because that also has nuance in terms of skin tones, they say we should just name the person and give context about the background. But honestly, that's just not the world we live in. And depending on the project, this might actually be relevant. So here's a great example of that. So the last question is actually pretty easy. No more trauma. Sorry, guys.
Wait, and Laneen, so Kriselle asked for an image like this.
Absolutely.
I'm confirming that we wouldn't need to fully describe the people's hair / clothing / accessories like glasses. I thought that was a great question. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. In this case, you wouldn't. Let's say if it was for a fashion brand and it was less about, you know, identity kind of things, you might say black shades or thin rimmed glasses. If it was more focused, like maybe even hair care product or anything like that, then you can say, you know, pink dyed curls or curly hair. And then that's relevant to the context of what it is. But since this is more of an identity focused project, that's what they did focus on. If it's just a general image, again, just think, is it relevant? Like if someone didn't know this person is wearing glasses, does that take away from the context or the information that I'm trying to convey? So, thank you for that.
Awesome.
All right. So last question, which hyperlink description would be more helpful for a screen reader user? So just picture that you have a link to something. Would you have that link say about Burb, or would you actually have the URL? So if someone had to click on something, which is more helpful for a screen reader for someone to click on, the about Burb or the full URL? A or B, A or B.
I'm just gonna send mine. We don't have to Zoom waterfall this.
Nah, just drop it in. You got a 50% chance of being right. It's cool.
I
Take a shot.
totally popped out and I said maybe both. Julian says I hope.
If you picked about Burb, you are right. And that's because using clear and accurate link descriptions are actually more helpful for screen readers. So the reason why you wouldn't pick that full URL is because the screen reader is going to read out that whole messy thing. It's going to literally see https:// like anybody got time for that? That's not helpful. But if the screen reader reads about Burb, the person knows, okay, I'm going to the about page. So just remember when you're sharing links in your community, or you're sharing resources and video links especially, just make sure your hyperlink text is descriptive and informative. So
Steph
know we
has
did
a
a lot
great
today.
question.
yeah.
I know we're
Please,
almost
please.
at official time,
it's
sorry, but Steph says, what are your thoughts on click here for about Burb, or does a screen reader
Ugh.
indicate that it is a hyperlink?
Yeah, you don't need click here. You don't need click. You don't need those kind of things. Similar to, I was answer this one. One, if you are running like a commerce-based kind of community, having click here 50,000 times is not helpful. So I see that a lot, byproduct, 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 and everything. Try to be descriptive. In terms of saying click here for Burb's bio or something, you can drop the click here because the screen readers will let the user know that it's an interactive bit. Same thing when you're writing your image descriptions, you don't have to say photo of woman standing at beach. You can just say woman standing on beach.
Can I ask another question that's kind of
Yeah.
around that? I've worked with companies where there's an assumption that the customers or the community members are low tech, like they're not comfortable with, they're either older or just not comfortable with technology. And I found myself always using click here to be like explicitly clear, like this is where you put your mouse to click the thing to go to the other thing. And so, but I never knew, I know it looks sloppy, but I just like didn't know how to be more explicitly clear in that scenario.
Yeah, no, I think for people that are new technology learners, or there's a learning curve, click here, download PDF, read more. I think in those cases, like again, context, just like with the image descriptions, if your target audience are new to technology or they are older and there's a learning curve, by all means, it doesn't hurt to have the click here. If you're in a case where you're just trying to, like, for some reason your buttons are really short and you just need to cram things in, you can drop it. But for that context, I think that'd be a great example. I use a lot of times download PDF. I specify that it's a PDF, so people don't think it's another large file or a Word document or something. So you might need to get a little more specific sometimes. Yeah, doesn't hurt.
Yeah, Laneen, why don't you do your closing slide? Because I know people have to go, and then anyone that wants to stay for an
Sure.
additional 15 minutes could ask any questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you guys want to reach out to me anytime, if you're going to start trying to use some of these practices, you get stuck, you have questions, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Sublation Studio, SUBLATION. And also my newsletter, sbltn.substack.com. But yeah, we'll stay here for a bit for unrecorded Q&A sessions. So brave space, bring any questions or problems you have, or reach out to me on social anytime.
Amazing. Thank you everyone for attending. Steph, if you want to stop the recording, that